If you're an iPad Air owner who's been wondering if you already have to upgrade your tablet now that Apple's released the iPad Air 2, you can breathe easy. Much like how Apple phones go from 5 to 5S, the iPad Air 2 is the iPad Air S in a lot of ways. It's thinner and faster with a better screen, but only just slightly. But that doesn't mean that the iPad Air 2 is a ho-hum release. People with older tablets and those looking to buy their first tablet won't be able to find anything better. Right now, it's the best full-size tablet on the market. This tablet is insanely thin. It's just 1/4 inch thick and weighs just under a pound. On paper, that's just a tiny bit lighter and thinner than last year's iPad Air and Sony's also very thin and light Xperia Z2. In the hand, the difference is noticeable, but nothing like the jump from the iPad 4 to the iPad Air. But even that subtle difference can seem significant after extended use. I never thought my iPad Air could seem chunky, but after a week with the Air 2, it did. The Air 2's screen is also improved, but you really have to go side by side with last year's Air or another tablet to notice it. Blacks are slightly deeper, and dark, cool colors are deeper and richer overall. It's also a little bit less reflective in direct light, but still painful to use under bright sunlight. You also won't escape having to wipe your fingerprints off the screen pretty frequently. When it comes to internals, the iPad Air 2 sports a new A8X chip, a variant of the iPhone's 64-bit A8 chip, and is the only device in Apple's lineup to do so. But even though it's fast and shows much stronger scores in our benchmarks compared to the iPad Air, for now it only offers marginally improved load times and graphics. This may change though, as apps that take advantage of the A8X chip start hitting the App Store. Where the iPad 2 truly hits new top speeds is on the web. Websites don't load, they snap to attention, and quicker than they did on the iPad Air. It's most obvious in Safari, but third-party browsers like Chrome have gotten a boost too. The iPad Air 2's battery life is basically the same as last year's model. Apple claims 10 hours of usage, which the iPad Air 2 easily achieves, even when streaming Netflix and using heavy apps like Infinity Blade 3. I got through a weekend of streaming movies, playing games, and reading comics without plugging it in. And if you're just popping it open occasionally for email and web browsing, you can go 4 or 5 days on a single charge. Best of all, it hardly drains at all when it's sitting idle. Overnight, the Air 2 typically lost only 2 to 3% with push and background app refresh enabled. The new iPad Air's camera is slightly improved for both stills and video. It takes a somewhat nicer picture, but nowhere near as nice as a premium smartphone like the iPhone 6 or the Note 4. It can also shoot 120 frames per second slow-motion video. Though not numerous, the features that have been added to the Air 2 make it feel like a more complete device than the last Air. Touch ID, the fingerprint scanner on the home button, is surprisingly useful. I've never felt the need to put a password on my iPad Air since it never leaves my apartment, but after spending time with the Air 2, I started to miss the feature. Touch ID also brings Apple Pay integration into a few apps. There's no NFC chip though, so you can't use it in a store. Not that you'd want to, really. You'll more likely use Handoff though, which is an iOS 8 feature that lets you open a web page or start an email on an OS X Yosemite-based system, then jump right into it from your iPad's lock screen. That is, when you can get it to work. I found Handoff to be inconsistent and ended up falling back on saving email drafts and using third-party apps like Pocket to stay in sync. For those who also own an iPhone, the Air 2 also lets you text Android and other non-iOS users thanks to its running of iOS 8. Your iPad basically piggybacks on your iPhone's data. The setup isn't easy to find, and both devices need to be on Wi-Fi, but there's no extra cost and makes using your iPad a more seamless, all-encompassing experience. At $500 for the 16GB bottom-tier Wi-Fi model, the Apple iPad 2 doesn't become an attractive buy until you shell out another $100 for the 64GB model. You're going to want to load this thing with movies and games. But at $450 for 32GB, last year's iPad Air is now a very attractive buy, and that's the biggest problem with Apple's new tablet. It's a step forward, not a leap, and for a lot of users, it won't be enough to justify a full-price purchase. But for those willing to part with that extra $150, you are getting that amount of functionality. You just may not need it. For more on the iPad Air 2, hit up IGN.